Okay, so next up, it's been like 4 weeks since I've read Worm, but we got some Worm because we took a week break, and then
Yeah.
the following week I didn't do Worm, and I usually do Worm right before we do the podcast, so it's fresh on my mind. So as it turns out, it's been a while. So yesterday I was like, okay, time to do some Worm, and I just busted out 4 chapters, which is rare for me because usually my small pea brain can only handle 2 chapters of reading. But my pea brain was bigger this time, and it handled 4. This is gonna cover. I think it's 11.3 to 11.6.
Yeah, which is kind of the bulk of this like merchant festival arc, which I always feel like I have to preface anything remotely negative I say with the fact that this is my favorite story ever. And it's gone on record that arc 11 is one of my 3 favorite arcs in the entire story. But it is not my favorite because of the merchant festival arc. I don't necessarily dislike it, but I don't really think it shines that much, especially compared to the interludes of arc 11. But we will get to that another week.
Right, there's 2 more chapters in this, and then the interlude. Oh, you say interludes, so I guess there's 2. Maybe I'll be able to do them all next time. But
We'll see.
so on like a structural time thing, the thing I want to most talk about are in the last 2 chapters. So we're gonna try to go through a little bit quicker on the first 2
Yeah,
because
and I think
I
it
do
helps.
have less things to say about them in general.
Yeah, and I think it helps that the first two we're discussing this week might be a little bit shorter than those latter two.
I think so.
And also, I think kind of what's going on might be a little bit simpler. There's a lot less being dumped on us.
Right. So where we left off, Taylor was taking over her territories. She's very OP and powerful. Like it kind of like out of all the characters we've seen, and I might be really misguided here. I'd probably put Taylor as like maybe the one of the strongest characters so far. Like she's not. How wrong am I here, Bradley? Because I feel like she can do so much stuff from a
Yeah.
long range.
No, I wouldn't even necessarily call you wrong. There's a lot of people who would be like, "Oh, Taylor is like Taylor's power's not that good. It's really weak, and it's interesting to
I
have that
don't
as the
know, man.
protagonist." And in the grand scheme of the world, she is very weak.
But out of
But
the characters we've met, like she's got to at least be mid tier or like
that's
high
the thing.
mid.
Like Taylor still views herself. Taylor always still views herself as that girl who was getting bullied. She doesn't think very highly of herself. But anytime in this story we see her from someone else's point of view, they are fucking terrified of her.
And like
Um,
she's handling all these merchants all across her territory while in her house sipping tea like
yeah,
effortlessly.
it
It's
this
disturbing and very strong.
this is and I think 11.3 is one of the ones I like more kind of in the first half of arc 11.
Hmm.
I really like this visual of her just like as a James Bond villain. She takes a sip of tea and then like over like across several city blocks, she just terrorizes and like lights fires using bugs, and then she takes another sip of her tea and she's like, "Oh, it's bitter."
Yeah, or like it's lukewarm now. I gotta finish it before it gets fully cold. It's like
Yeah.
you're out here destroying people.
Yeah, and I think it just goes to show that, like in the grand scheme of things, even if she's not the most powerful person in the world, which she's not by a long shot, her power is perfectly suited for the task that she has at hand.
And this is something that comes up next chapter, but all the other Undersiders are having a much tougher time getting their territory fully in control, while she seems decently ahead of them, like quite a bit at this point.
Yeah, it's like none of the other ones can have perfect surveillance over several city blocks and fight multiple people at once from their bed.
God,
So,
terrifying. I would hate to fight her so much because she was mentioning like she's knocking people out by choking them with bugs. She's stuffing bugs in their throats and like knocking them out that way through asphyxiation. So it's like, ugh.
yeah, there's been a lot of people. I've always seen people kind of on a meta level say that Taylor's like on the weaker end of parahumans, and I've been of the opinion that people think that because Taylor thinks that, but I am like,
Makes
holy
sense.
shit, she is terrifying and
Like
very versatile.
like out of the ones we've seen, like there's obviously the top tier boys. There's like Dragon
Yeah,
and Arm Master maybe, but like among her age group, like I feel like she destroys everyone, especially at a range. But
yeah,
um, the other part of 11.3 I wanted to talk about is she meets this woman whose brother got kidnapped and her friend got brutally tortured by the merchants. Which it's dark. He sticks a bottle up his ass, and yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
And
Warhammer
man,
model?
we are gonna learn that the merchants are just the worst people.
that's horrible.
And what's sad is that it kind of makes sense that in a post Leviathan city where like everything is just run down, there's no work, um, there's no real amenities. These kind of people thrive. Um, so we kind of see that they've grown, and we're going to see all kinds of the horrible things they do when these kinds of people thrive. But that'll be going forward.
And like it's almost a bit too dark, and I know like you told me the story gets much darker in specific chapters, so it's like
Yeah,
it's gonna get
I
bloody.
believe the arc that we're entering is the darkest the story gets. Like stakes might increase, but tone wise,
Oof.
we're gonna get bleak.
I feel like Wild Bow was in a slightly darker place in these in these two arcs. I feel like, um, and basically the girl asked Taylor to go rescue her brother, who she thinks got kidnapped by the merchants.
Yeah,
And then Taylor kind of lets the girl into her home so she can at least sleep somewhere safe, which
yeah,
I thought
and
was not a good idea. I don't know.
the thing is, Taylor at some point she is going to have to. She kind of, I think she made it clear in her speech to the people in her territory that she is going to be looking for kind of people who want to work for her. And also, I think it's kind of the person she is, where every once in a while, Taylor does decide that the right thing to do is actually the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of funny. We get a weird contrast where I went back and I read the first arc after reading this chapter, where it's not unusual in superhero fiction for villains to be humanized. It's been done a lot,
Yeah.
um, but people in this story don't always realize that at first. Like even Taylor in Arc One, when she first met the Undersiders and she's talking to Armsmaster about them, she's like, they didn't really seem like villains. They were just kind of joking around like teenagers. And of course now Taylor's like, okay, like capes are just
We're all villains.
yeah, and so we kind of see that this girl's in that same headspace where she's like, you drink tea? Like, what the fuck is this? Like, so
But I feel like this is weird because she's giving a civilian her address and how to get in through the secret passageway.
yeah,
I don't know about that one, Chief. Like, I feel like it's frustrating how she's too nice sometimes, despite the fact that she knows, like, she can't be that nice. Like, this could really come back and bite her in the ass.
yeah. We are not done with these characters.
Yeah,
So
I
I think
feel...
we'll get more. I think we'll get more fleshed out on this situation.
What was this character's name again? I forgot.
We meet two girls in Arc 11.
I remember
Charlotte,
Charlotte. Yeah.
and this is Sierra.
Sierra, right.
Here we go.
Okay. That's all I got for 11.3.
There we go. It's a pretty short chapter. The
Not
two main
much to
components
say.
are that kind of the exposition, like, hey, my brother needs help, and Taylor being horrifying.
So on to 11.4. This is more like we get to see Lisa's operation, where she's in a very public shelter in this more rundown part of town. And it's kind of cool how she kind of works there. She's not even the boss. She's got people working for her pretending to be higher up, so suspicion can't be on her.
Yeah,
And
if anything, I thought it was interesting to see kind of how her style is contrasting with Taylor's,
Very.
where she kind of has to hire people to do the work for her.
Because she has no physical abilities really.
Yeah.
And you can get like the theme of her side of the operation is information gathering. She can gather all sorts of information with the people coming in and out of the shelter and her power. So one thing that was like weird is like, so Taylor's people don't know Taylor's identity, but Lisa's people do. And then she also has Taylor come in without her costume, and I haven't gotten to how she plans to cover for her. She's like, oh, she's just a friend and she's here for a reason. But it's like, I feel like this is pretty obvious that she's an accomplice of yours if she's going on this mission with you.
Yeah,
So,
I think it is pretty obvious too, but I don't think they particularly care that much.
Taylor seemed to care.
Yeah.
And you get to introduce to her soldier squad, and they're all just pieces of work, ex-military macho men. One guy's really creepy with Taylor, and she has a really disturbing description of him where he wears a fake smile, but like he's just all sorts of fucked up inside. And she's like, would I even have realized this if I didn't meet bitch before?
Yeah, and it's like, and it's kind of like, I think Lisa even points out that not all of her guys are as scumbaggy as this, but the reason she left the good guys back at her base is because she doesn't trust these assholes to run things.
Plus, she wanted more burly men if they're gonna go into this weird merchant rave to find the kidnapped brother.
Which might have been a good call.
Yeah, I'll say. So Lisa has this theory that I thought was notable, where she's like, our powers are strongest when we're closer to trigger events. Bradley, you've gone on record out of the podcast, but in your talkings of how much you like the series, you've kind of touched on the subject of how cool trigger events are and how well they're integrated to the story. This was just something interesting to note on, and I'm gonna touch on it later in this podcast segment.
Yeah, because there's something further on that's sort of relevant to what they were talking about here in some ways, maybe.
And you have to wonder though, is this a way for Wild Bill to just darken up the story, because he's really going for this more gritty, dark mood, especially in this in this arc, I guess. So I'm interested to see, like, is there a good reason for this? Because in most things, it's like, I like there to be a positive and negative balance to something, but it's like, if only negative things power you up, I need there to be a really good reason to why it's so unfair and grim. I guess we'll see.
My answer to that would be yes, there is, but obviously I'm not going to tell you.
You've gone on record to say that you love the power system in Worm, and it's a big reason why it's your favorite story.
I love it because of how intertwined your power and the circumstances of getting it are with who you are, or rather who you became after the trigger event.
Interesting. Well, I guess we'll see.
We will get to that eventually.
On to 11.4. No, are we on 5? Yeah, 11.5.
There we go.
So you get to the merchant party, and it's just an absolute shit show. It couldn't be worse. It couldn't have worse people. It's so trashy.
Yeah, these are probably just like the scummy. I think these are probably like the scummiest people that we will see in the story. Like
even more than the Slaughterhouse 9, huh? Like, because,
well, I guess in a different way.
yeah. Because like these people are just disgusting, and it's really, it's a sad message that this is where society goes to after shit goes wrong. Because Taylor thinks, like, how many percentage of people end up here? Like 1 in 100, 1 in 50. If it's even that, that's way too high of a number for how shitty this place is.
Yeah, and this is probably the chapter that 11.5 is probably the chapter that I cared the least about, which there are a few really good moments in this chapter.
I'd agree with you on
but
all
it kind of reminds me of the end of Arc 10, like with Bitch's Betrayal, where it's like we have some really good moments, but they're sandwiched between moments that
are just
like,
okay.
Like, yeah, they make sense for them to be there, but I don't know if we need them as much as the big character moments.
That's kind of the Worm structure for me, where it's a lot of build up to really good moments so far. Yeah. Joe posted memes out here.
Oh
no. So Lisa does this fun thing where she pretends to buy some ecstasy in order to blend in, but she just gives everyone sugar pills. fits her power. Like that's some good information she would have. Like she would know that to bring the sugar pills because she could buy drugs there, and that would be a good way to blend in more, etc.
Yeah, like
Um,
that's a moment where it's like, it makes sense, and it's in character. But if we were going for like a printed, published, edited version that we want to be shorter, we could probably take it out.
right. I mean, that's also the worm. Like there's a lot of small things that could be taken out here and there for a little bit of brevity, which I'd appreciate. But I'm sure a lot of people would be like, no, I like the small details, preference thing, you know. Um, so I think Taylor's kind of insufferable in this chapter, and it's been a while. In general, I'm not a fan of Taylor. I dislike her pretty often. Um,
And I don't even think that's crazy. Like I know a lot of people who would also consider this their favorite story who are like, "Oh my gosh, I can't stand this girl." But
okay.
I
Well, I'm
think it's
sure
good.
they have reasons later on as she probably gets crazier and crazier. But like for this one, it's like she sees this random girl dancing on this platform, and she's dancing there, and people are reaching out to her, and it's just this weird situation where she's forced to give them a show, and if she doesn't, they're all just gonna grab her and do whatever they want with her, and it's all grim, dark, and fun. And she's just like, "We're saving this person. I don't care what you have to say. I'm gonna do it, even if you don't want to come with me." It's like, fucking Taylor, you're here for a job. You're here to save the brother.
Yeah.
Why are you being annoying about this one girl?
And this is a thing we've talked about in the past where her problem is, I guess you could call it a problem sometimes. Sometimes it's not a problem. Sometimes it is. Where once she has made up her mind that something is the right thing to do, like there's nothing on earth that's going to change it. And sometimes this works out good. Most of the time, it works out
Not so good.
not so good. I do appreciate one thing I do appreciate about this arc on some level, is that kind of this whole mission to the merchant rave, whatever. It's kind of the first really classically heroic mission that Taylor has done in the entire story. She's not committing a crime. She's not
Hmm.
harassing the heroes.
And the
She,
girl thanks her, which is
yeah,
big.
she really is here to save people. And I think the thing that makes it more interesting for me is that she didn't go on her first hero mission until she fully took on the role of supervillain warlord.
Yeah, I guess it's just be like that sometimes. Um, so the girl turns out to be a girl named Charlotte who recognizes Taylor from school, and I like this as like a tension builder where it's just automatically like, oh, this girl now recognizes me. She thinks I'm with the merchant. I can't tell her why I'm actually here because then she'll know my actual role, which is even worse. So there's all these kinds of connotations which aren't shown in this group of chapters I read, but might come back later. Um,
Yeah, we are definitely setting up for,
some shit.
yeah. And it's really interesting to see how quickly um, Taylor's sympathy for this girl kind of starts disappearing as she found out that
It was
th- this girl was present for the worst thing that has ever happened to Taylor and didn't
right.
help her.
I
Uh,
felt it was almost a little bit forced, where like they just quickly start arguing about it, and the girl is like really dumb with like, "Oh, you're the girl who got shit on in the locker that one time." It's like, why now? Like now's not a good time. At least she apologizes for it after.
yeah, once she realizes like how horrible this must be for Taylor, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," but at that point, the damage might be done.
So they run into Bryce, the brother. He's a piece of shit as far as he's showing. You get the feeling that he's kind of showing off in front of his sister. But if there's any truth to what he said, where he just joined the merchants because, oh, everything was lame and I needed a little bit of fun, and they showed up and they could get me out of this shelter that I was in, it's like, oh, you're the worst.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
I think this is the mindset of that like 1 in 100, 1 in 50 people who come here. These are the
Yeah.
people who are like everything's gone to shit. Like I don't want to work on rebuilding stuff. I just want to party. Which I don't know. I think that is kind of his mindset.
Yeah.
Uh, I
That's
don't know
it.
if this was a reveal that he came of his own accord. Up till now, I wasn't it. We thought he got kidnapped.
Right. Yes. This was a reveal as far as unless I missed something. This was a reveal.
Yeah.
Um, and then Skidmark starts setting up this stage to get a big free for all brawl.
Absolute skid mark of a human being.
Yeah, what a name, huh? Very fitting. And he's like, "Hey, if 5 of you win, you get these superpowers in a can." And I'm like, "That's a thing? Is this a thing, Bradley?
Oh, it's a thing.
What the fuck?"
And that closes off the chapter.
That does close off the chapter. Which leads us into this chapter that I really like. I feel like the payoff to everything that's been happening.
Yeah, I think this is the second highest rated chapter you have after Alex interlude.
Yeah, I think it's tied with Bakuda for me. I really like that one as well.
Yeah.
So this one, it opens up basically with the dumbass Bryce taking his girlfriend into the ring to join the people that kidnap him, that they're like now his new family.
Yeah, I think it's the girl's family, and man, what a little shit.
And Taylor, of course, like, she can't abandon the mission. She will never change her mind. And Lisa hits us with the line of, "My friend wants to save him, and she usually has good reasons for doing what she does." And that kind of annoyed me because...
Yeah, no. Even the first time I read this story, when I was much more on Taylor's side than I was now, I was like, does she really have good reasons for doing
And like, I get fed up with Taylor sometimes. It's like, not even her friends call her out on her bullshit. They're like, you know what, she has good reasons, so we're gonna stay here and die. And this big fight, there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief that it's just not just mass killings, because people are coming at you with knives from all directions. You have 4 big guards, but they're constantly like getting like in trouble, like they're getting broken off from the group by other people, so they're not always there protecting you. Lisa can't really fight, and they're protecting Charlotte, and somehow they all come out of it alive. So it's like that, sure, but I guess the majority of the fighting was in the middle of the ring, so I can believe it when you go with that. But like the way it was described, it seemed really chaotic.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is the majority of this chapter, which I don't have a huge problem with the action sequences in Worm. I know that you don't really care for the ones that are mostly like punching and kicking, because it's like, do we like, if the focus of the story is doing combat with these powers, how much of the punching and kicking do we want, or it works better on a screen?
And it's also a thing of like, the longer they're drawn out, the more likely I am to get fed up with the action sequences. I felt like this one, it's whatever. It got made up for like the stuff after the fighting.
Yeah. So I've seen those sentiments echoed in other places online. And
I'm surprised.
Okay,
so at least I'm not fully alone on that. But let's get to the meat of why I love this chapter. So, someone in the middle of the fight ring awakens to their power. They go through their trigger event, which is the whole reason why the fight ring is happening. It's so Skidmark can force people to have trigger events.
Yeah.
Pretty cool idea. Pretty fucked up, but pretty cool. The first time I read the sequence that followed, I didn't even know what to comment. I didn't even know what I would say.
Yeah.
And it is the trippiest, hardest to understand and parse stuff in the story so far.
Yeah, I think it's kind of purposefully cryptic. It's like if you are someone who does have all the details, there's a little bit more rhyme and reason to what you're reading.
A little bit, you're saying. So it's still sort of mystic even after. Like,
it is 100%. I think it is purposefully cryptic, but it makes sense if you have the full context.
So it's described as tesseracts the size of small planets overlapping in dimensions. I can't even picture this in my mind. It's so weird. Now, after thinking about it, I got some big theories, but let's finish the chapter.
Yes.
Before I get to these big theories. So, what it's established as is these visions that both Taylor and Lisa saw everyone that has a power is experiencing them because someone went into a trigger event, right? Like, I didn't misinterpret that.
Yeah, like everybody there who has powers was briefly
hallucinating and seeing this. And this includes the people, the merchants, the main merchants that have powers.
Yeah.
And Charlotte is smart enough to piece this together, which is, I like that.
Yeah, she's like, wait a second
here. And then Lisa is still kind of freaking out, and she describes this as they're like viruses and babies and gods all in one. Okay,
It's
that'll.
very apt.
And she has the power that can help her piece together. And unfortunately, Taylor snaps her out of it before she can do it. So I guess I'll have to wait another 20 arcs before I really know. But
Before this happens again.
right. So the fighting ends, even though there's 80 people left, and I didn't really understand why this was. Even though there's like 80 people left in the ring, they stopped the fighting and say 5 people won. Am I
What I
right?
read it as is the whole reason he was doing this anyway was he really just wanted someone to have a trigger event.
But then,
Uh,
how did he arbitrarily select the family of 3? The person who was almost dying, and then the person who had the trigger event.
because he's Skidmark, and I think he just doesn't give a fuck.
Really? Okay. Because it says like everyone parted and like let those people
I would
walk up.
probably need to actually read that part again
That'd be cool if you reread it and you have any more insight for me, because I was a
because
little bit
I didn't
confused.
actually read that part today.
So anyways, he makes the kid choose which person he's gonna give the juice to. He chooses Duck over Rick because Doug actually helped him, or maybe it was Rick that actually helped him. I'll remember next chapter.
Either way to go.
Either way, he gave it to one of his friends, and his other friend is like, "What the fuck, man?" So, 5 more people are about to get powers, and the Fault Lines crew shows up,
Yeah, and we have not
Which-
seen them for a very long time.
which is a problem because, as you know, I read these over a stretch, so I'm gonna need some help. I've learned not to Google things about Worm because you guys are pretty loose to spoilers in your Wikipedia. You guys should really have a spoiler section, for the love of God.
Yeah, Wikipedia people.
Now, this feeds in to my big theory part.
All right.
Okay, so there's 2. First of all, can you remind me how the Manta effect works?
Yeah, so the Manton effect is
Mantan effect, right?
essentially the running theory on the people in this universe, and I'm making it clear that this is what the people in universe believe up to this point. Um, it would appear that powers usually either exclusively work on organic things or they exclusively work on non-organic things.
And it's like a self-balancing act of, like, some of the stronger powers won't kill people; they'll work on inorganic stuff. And
Yeah.
basically, the universe finds a way to balance itself.
Kind of like if someone can make fireballs appear in the middle of the air, they usually can't do it
Inside of a person.
inside of a person.
Okay. Something weird happened this chapter then. As Eraser, or Scrub, I think he was named after,
Yeah.
as his power was awakening, he was shooting lasers that were tearing people apart. This is one of the few times we've seen people die. Like, it's actually kind of rare that people die in Worm, I feel.
Yeah, especially up to this point. Like
There was the Leviathan part where people died, and then, like, Taylor never killed anyone. The Undersiders haven't killed anyone on screen, as far as
I think
I
the
can
only
remember.
times we've really seen death up to this point was Leviathan and then like a few people with Bakuda.
Yeah, so people are dying here, which makes sense. Anyways, this is people getting torn to flesh. One person gets hit, it's a corpse on the ground. They get hit, and the leg gets blown apart, but the ground underneath them doesn't. Okay?
Yeah.
So this is a power that only works with organic matter. But when he's up on the stage about to get the drink, his power bursts again, and it's destroying the ceiling and metal beams now. Which character was trying to discover the secrets of the Manton effect? It was Bakuda, right?
Quite a few people are doing it. Bakuda, definitely. I think up to this point, the 2 people we've actually seen worry about it the most are Bakuda with her bombs, and during Gregor the Snail's interlude.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, he walked in on Fault Line trying to cut like dead pieces of wood and living pieces of wood,
Right.
closing her eyes to see if she could trick her power, which she could not.
Okay. So back to chapter 11.5. There's a theory that the closer you are to your trigger event, the stronger it gets. There's a few examples of it happening to Taylor. And here we have a guy who clearly breaks the Manton theory, Manton effect.
Yeah, like it's kind of indiscriminately destroying people and
or matter.
objects alike.
So I'm gonna say that I guess what this establishes is if you're going through a trigger event or close to it, you can ignore the Manton effect. And if this is the case, I'm kind of surprised that they haven't figured this out, considering how well documented and known trigger events are. But well, whatever. This is all theory right now, so I guess we'll see. And yeah, this sets up the precedent of them having to go deeper into their trigger events in order to break it in the future. I guess we'll see how that goes. That's theory part one. Thoughts, comments.
I think for some of that, you made some like really, really good catches that I don't think some people would make, and some of it is blatantly wrong. But I won't tell you which is which.
Okay,
so
well,
you can just tear over that.
I'm gonna guess the part that's right is the stated part of him being able to hit organic matter and then inorganic, and surely something triggering is happening there. Okay, with the Tesseracts, this one. I have a theory. So there's another chapter where we saw this happen. It was that interlude in like another country. It was like in Africa or something.
Yeah, that would be Miss Militia.
Miss Militia's interlude.
I think she just went by Hannah in that chapter.
At that point, I couldn't figure out what the fuck was happening, and I've forgotten most of it. But I know it happened. Yeah. I should go back and read it at some point. Okay. There was two objects interlapping in dimensions, and then they started getting farther apart, and they communicated with each other. And it stated that each communication had like the force of a supernova. What the fuck does that mean? Whatever. It's two objects. Okay. Now, some of the connections I'm making here is because of the Wikipedia being shitty, partially. Where if you I forgot what Glory Girl's power is, and you scroll down just one line too much, you get to this world called this word called passengers, and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be looking at whatever this is. Okay.
Yeah.
Passengers. The story's called Worm. Oh, okay.
Okay.
And then there's this obscure reference in a game called Slay the Spire. And it's a worm reference, and it says, this is a story about a little girl that has a little worm living in her. Okay. I can't lie to myself and pretend like I don't see what's going on there. So there's clearly... So at first I was like, Bradley, you really like the power system in Worm. Are there like gods or planets living inside the humans? And I don't remember what you said, but I remember the answer making me think no. And okay, fair, but there's clearly some organisms inside these people, and they're involved with the power. And what we saw was Taylor's organism, or passenger, I guess, communicating with erasers or scrubs, and then they split apart, and they were like, we'll meet again. All right. Maybe that's something in the future where they're all destined to meet or something. Maybe this speaks to the greater plot of Worm. And yeah, I basically think that there's these weird organisms in the people giving them powers, and they communicated with each other while that was happening. And they all got a glimpse of it. And there's a lot of questions to be asked, but I feel like because of those three small out of context words and spoilers, I'm gonna start looking at the series different than a first time viewer or reader that had nothing to go off of might. So I guess we'll see where that leads me. It might lead me somewhere completely wrong.
And I'm not actually that worried, because kind of like with the previous theory, like some of that is pretty spot on, and then some of it is just not at all.
And even if it was all right, I wouldn't understand why it matters or like what the purpose is. So there's still plenty to discover.
Like this is I've told Willer about this before. This is my favorite story of all time. I've read it multiple times, and whenever I first got into it, I accidentally read the final 2 chapters first.
Jesus.
Because that's what was linked first on the website. And you know what? It ended up not hurting anything for me because it's my favorite story. And even then, some of that stuff you got from like the wiki dive is stuff that's mentioned in this upcoming arc anyway.
Okay, nice. So at
So
least I'm not too far away from catching up to at
yeah,
least the word.
the vibe I got from what you told me, I don't really think there was that much spoiled. And I think you got about as much out of this cryptic sequence in this chapter as anyone can.
Do you think
Like I'd be,
most people would get that?
uh, there. If you look in I've looked in the comment sections, and there are people who get to some similar
I look at them and
conclusion.
they're talking about random stuff. I guess you got to dig really deep.
Yeah, I've seen people in the comments on chapters get to similar conclusions with obviously with differences, but yeah, I'd be really surprised to see anyone get the full picture from these cryptic sequences at this point. But I really don't think you were spoiled on that much.
I've said it once. I've said it again. The mystery and plot have me hooked in Worm, and it's a long road. But at this point, I gotta know what's happening, and a wiki dive's not gonna cut it. So I'll have to brave it out. Go on this wild
Um,
journey with these weird tesseract planets talking to each other.
so
Fun
yeah,
times.
that is kind of actually the bulk of this whole merchant rave arc. Um,
I'll wrap it
we
up next section that I read.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up pretty soon, and then there's an interlude or two, which I've been are some of my favorite chapters in the entire story. So we will get there when we get there.
I guess we will, and that's what we got for Worm. We can
Ta-da!
let's get the defibrillators and let's wake Joe up. Okay, hey Joe, you alive?
I had some spaghetti.